one of our core techniques and tools are actually psychological assessments. And one of our fortes, because of my background in psychology and my background in business, is to help people understand what is going on within the people that are working in the organization.
All right, everyone, welcome back to SALESBIZ. I appreciate you all taking the time. Before we kick off today's episode, folks, I looked at the stats. 94% are not subscribed. Not subscribed. That's not okay. Please go ahead and subscribe. Hit that like button. And if you find value out of this episode, drop some comments down below. Today, my guest is a very extraordinary gentleman who has an MBA and PhD of business administration. Very impressive. A doctor of business, helping organizations maximize their organizational strategies through his business. I'm super excited to get to know him and talk about his journey. Dr. Michael Abelson. Michael, welcome.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing well, sir. Once again, appreciate you taking the time. It's Dr. A moving forward, I promise.
Good.
So, Dr. A, let's get into it. PhD in business administration, very impressive. But let's talk about your journey to get there. How did you make that decision, and how did you invest your time to get into that field?
Well, it's an interesting journey in that I actually started out in psychology, and I have an undergraduate in psych, and I worked at a state mental hospital for a year. And then I decided actually to go back and get a master's degree in clinical psychology, which I did. And then I ran a crisis center for 2 years and made all kinds of mistakes when I was managing that. So I figured, well, let me go back and learn a little bit more. Maybe I'll get it right next time. So then I went in and decided to get an MBA, and it turned out that I got it both an MBA and a PhD at the same time. So then I taught at Texas A&M University for a little over 30 years, taught small classes of 450 students for 20 of those years, and taught a lot of executives, done over 1,000 executive sessions over the years, and it's been a lot of fun. So we do all kinds of neat stuff. And one of the interesting aspects and weirdness about my background is I have both a background in psychology, both scholastically as well as practical, as well as a background and education in business, because I've been running businesses since the mid-70s.
Very impressive. Wow. So let's go, before we dive into the business side, clinical psychology, was that an underlying passion of yours, or something that you've always wanted to get into?
Well, I wanted to get into psychology to better understand how people work. And it was really interesting. I found it interesting. I really didn't start out on the journey that way. What happened was, when I worked at the state mental hospital for a year, it was an interesting experience. I worked with people who were psychotic, as well as I worked with people who were mentally retarded. And we did all kinds of neat stuff. My title was recreation therapist, but I actually wound up using basketballs and balls and different types of exercises to be therapeutic, to get them to open up and talk to each other and buy into the challenge of living, especially the ones who had difficulties and challenges with their intellectual being. I mean, the highest IQ of anybody on either of the buildings that I worked on was 68. The average is 100, okay, and one standard deviation is 15. So they basically were in the one percentile of the country, and that was the most intelligent person IQ-wise that I worked with, which really opened up my eyes and got me thinking about all kinds of stuff. And that's why I decided to go back and get the master's in clinical. Then when I was running the crisis center, it started out as a very, very small crisis center. And within a year, we actually had 5 staff and around 70 volunteers. And at the end of the second year, we were actually, instead of in one city, we were in 4 counties in mid-Michigan.
Wow.
So that was an interesting experience. But then, I decided, well, let me go back and see if I can figure it out again, which I'm still trying to figure it out, Mike. It's an interesting journey that we all take. So for me, the real fun really is working with organizations and looking at organizations as they are puzzle pieces, and helping them identify what the pieces are and put the pieces together in a more effective way.
Absolutely. Seems like you adopted a lot of patience and humility going through that career first before diving into the corporate world.
Well, one of the things that I learned, and this is in just about any career, they really don't care about you, they care about themselves. So my focus is to focus on them. And my strategy and feeling is if I do a good job focusing on them, some of them will actually focus back on me. Not a lot of them, but some of them. And it's I think that's really important in life because that's how you establish relationships. Because just
Yeah.
about everybody's interested in themselves, and if you show some true interest in other people, then they have a desire to sometimes pay it back.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned the crisis. The crisis was not funny, but you mentioned the crisis side of it. I actually tried to do some volunteer work around that to try to give back with 2020 and everything that's happened. And it was a strenuous process from what I remember to get that approved. What is that process like if you wanted to? I mean, you started your own center, but if anyone wanted to actually just help out from a volunteer standpoint, what is that process like?
Well, that highly depends on the organization that you're with. I mean, what we used to do is we wanted to make sure people were really committed to working with us. So we made it difficult to become a volunteer. And what happens is most people want to be part of an organization they can't be part of, okay? Or people tell them they can't be part of, which increased the energy level and people wanted to join us more. But to answer your question more directly, my suggestion would be if somebody's interested in volunteering, that just contact them, and if you show that you're interested in it, then they usually give you an opportunity. If not, go to another one. There's plenty of worthwhile organizations that need help, especially it's what's going on with COVID right now and what's going on with the homeless, with a lot of people out of work and people who, so a lot of people who are at work still can't afford housing, so there are significant needs out there right now.
Yeah, I think the one I was trying to volunteer for, it was just a personal thing of mine, is helping kids cope with parents having cancer, something along
Wow.
those lines. It's a personal experience. So I'm guessing because of the fact that working with kids may be a little bit more of a challenge. That was always my contention around it, but maybe I'm wrong. But definitely have to look into that. So you obviously gave a lot back, and then you got into the business world. What are some of the challenges you immediately noticed when dealing with mentally unstable or crisis a victim, whatever, versus actually the business world? Did you find it more appealing, or was it just as nuts, if not more?
Well, it's there are how many billions of people, so there are billions of stories about how this all works. So yeah, there's different challenges. It's like anything else. I mean, when I was working with the people who were mentally challenged, there was the objective to try and get them to come out a little bit more, to try and see what their strengths are and to help them with their strengths and use their strengths and help them build their confidence, so they feel better about themselves, so they're willing to do things and they're willing to try things. One of the things that I find when I'm working with businesses is obviously it's a whole different ballgame because most cases are pretty darn intelligent. And to me, the challenge then is to help them in a way that they want to be helped. And that's not necessarily easy. I mean, to me, a good consultant is somebody who identifies what the real problem is. All right. A lot of
Absolutely.
times, I mean, these people are so bright in most cases that if they knew what the real problem was, they could solve it. So one of the things that I do whenever I'm working with an organization and we look from a strategic point of view, I like to go in and interview a lot of different people and promise confidentiality. And one of the techniques that I have is I actually sit down with the CEO or the president with all their lieutenants, and I look at the CEO or the president, and I said, now we have this agreement that I'm going to be able to talk to everybody. And if there's something that comes up that I shouldn't be sharing, I don't have to share it. In fact, I'm not going to be sharing anything that I'm told by one person. What I do is I look at things, and if I see it from 3 or 4 people, or the more I hear the same story, the more I believe it's true, right? And then what happens is that helps me identify what the real problem is within the organization. And once you find out what the real problem is and you open up the CEOs or the presidents or the vice presidents or the directors, eyes to what the real problem is, the biggest problem is selling them on the idea that that is the real problem. Okay. And then once you do that, usually the solution is a lot easier to get done. Now, one of the things that we spend a lot of time with is one of our core techniques and tools are actually psychological assessments. And one of our fortes, because of my background in psychology and my background in business, is to help people understand what is going on within the people that are working in the organization. Because a lot of organizations, when they're trying something new, they focus on the technology. Let's get the best technology and let's make sure the technology is great. But that's not really what the true challenge is when it comes to change. The true challenge is to get the people to actually adopt the technology and be willing to deal with the differences that they're going to be experiencing because of the technology. So what we focus on is the people aspect of any type of organization, any type of solution. And one of the things that we like to focus on is we have a cadre of psychological assessments that we use. And what most people do that are in my shoes is they focus on like one science or one type of assessment. Okay, for example, the Myers-Briggs is a very, very popular assessment, right? Myers-Briggs looks at how people are. Excuse me? Okay.
ENTP.
All righty. And so what happens is that's really how you function cognitively, how you think and how you make decisions. Right. Well, that's just one aspect of somebody's personality. All right. For people who are watching this, if you're working with somebody who tells you that they have a personality indicator, you need to start asking them a whole bunch of questions, because personalities are really complicated. All right. There's another assessment a lot of people use, and we use this one as well. It's called the DISC, but there's over 30 different DISCs, and DISCs don't measure personality. They just measure behavior. All right. So if you really want to understand somebody, you have to measure their behavior. You have to measure what motivates that behavior. You might want to measure what their emotional intelligence is. You might want to measure what their stress factors are. You might want to measure what their leadership characteristics and strengths and limitations are. We measure all of those things. So we look at it as a very, very complicated aspect, which we are, and then we help people understand that. So we actually, when we help organizations with solutions, we actually look at what is the real problem, whether it be technology, whether it be financial, whether it be structural, whatever it is, okay? And then how to understand the people so you can help them deal with the problem and you can help them work together to deal with the problem.
Yeah, no question. I got to tell you though, I'm actually blown away how accurate those Myers-Briggs and predictive indexes, the DISCs are. I've taken those many times. Myers-Briggs, I always landed ENTP. It never veered off in one direction. So I don't know whether it was with the algorithms or questions, but it was pretty spot on. The predictive index, though, kind of changed as my career evolved. I don't know why. Maybe we'll talk about that one day. But is that part of what, are you seeing similar type of results within your business? Is that when you're doing these evaluations, if they retake them, they seem to have similar results every single time?
Well, what happens is if you're measuring somebody's behavior, the probability that they've changed their behavior increases, especially as people get more mature and older. They have different experiences. So you would expect the indicator, whichever one it is, to pick that up. You would hope that they would pick it up. Now, there's some people that tell you that your DISC or your Myers-Briggs doesn't change. That's craziness. All right. If you have a significant life event, all right, that's the easiest way to look at expect a change. Right. For example, maybe somebody important to them, maybe their parent comes down with a terrible disease or cancer or an illness or something like that. Right. And that gets people thinking, well, if that could happen to them, maybe it could happen to me. And then they start changing, thinking about it. Now, it doesn't mean that they will change, but there's probability that they'll change. There's situational things. You can be in a different type of organization. You might be in an organization that's very relationship driven, and the context that you're in has an impact on you. So you become a little bit more relationship driven. You could be in an organization that's very, very task driven, right? So that context can have an impact. So there can be the change. One of the interesting things about the Myers-Briggs is to put you in one of 16 boxes, okay? So it's easier to fit into a particular box repeatedly, right? What we do with our behavioral style, we put you in one of 384 different boxes. So it's that much more sensitive to picking up how people are going to behave and what they're going to be looking at. And then we look at emotional intelligence. So there's different boxes, all right? And then we look at what motivates you. So there's different boxes. So when we work with you, we can actually come up with a couple thousand different indicators or boxes instead of 16 that the Myers-Briggs does. Now, I'm going to want to knock the Myers-Briggs. It's an excellent tool. I was trained in my PhD program with the Myers-Briggs. My dissertation chair and one of the people who I respected most at the university that I got my PhD at was a Myers-Briggs guru. Okay, he could make that assessment sing. All right. But there's also other solutions. PI is a good assessment. There's something called the Big Five. Okay, there are a lot of good assessments out there. The trick really, though, is to get somebody who like a magician. Okay, it's not the wand, it's the person behind the wand. So what you want to do is you just don't want to be concerned about the accuracy of the assessment, what the assessment is, but you really have to be concerned about the skill of the magician who is helping you with that assessment.
Love it. So with respect to these evaluations, Doctor, Myers-Briggs, for instance, took me about 20 minutes. PI took me about 40. What kind of evaluation are we talking about to be put into one of 384 boxes?
Well, our particular disc puts you in the one in 384, and that only takes 12 to 15 minutes. If
Wow.
you want to add if you want to add the motives or what's driving that behavior to it, we're talking 20, 22 minutes on average. Some people take less, some people take more. You want to add the EQ, it's a little longer. You want to, if you add stuff, but one of the problems, and this is another thing that your listeners should be aware of, what happens is you don't want something that's too long or too tedious, because what happens is people get tired and they have a hard time focusing, right? And the longer it is, if you get some of these assessments like an hour and 15 minutes, it's hard for most people to focus for an hour and 15 minutes. Okay, most people have a hard time focusing past 8 or 16 seconds. Okay, so you have to be concerned about something that is that long and that lengthy regarding what it is that you're doing. Again, another insight regarding how to choose an effective assessment tool when you're working with these assessment tools.
Yeah, these things have made us very ADD friendly, unfortunately. Yeah. You are definitely correct. I can't imagine sitting through. I took I wanted to become a lawyer when I was going to college, and then I saw two things. One, the bill for law school, but two, the LSAT was an 8-hour exam and multiple choice, not my niche. So that's where we kind of parted ways. But I couldn't agree with you more that people are having a lot of difficulty focusing these days. So I'd imagine sitting through an evaluation for hours is not something that's tenable.
Right. And you can see the focus issue. I do a lot of, executive work and before COVID, did a lot of, in-person seminars and programs, and I'm always moving around. I'm always changing the format. We'll have videos, we'll have different things we do. We do a lot of online training. That's one of the ways that we've pivoted. We have a lot of online training. We actually have a training platform that's got about 200 assets on it right now of short videos and articles, right? But we also have longer training. And when we do the longer training, you need to make sure that you are concerned about people's attention spans because of computers and smartphones and just look at I've got fantastic grandkids, right? And they're playing all these games all the time, and you've got young kids, and they're playing all these games all the time, and they're always fast moving. So of course, when it comes to education, what are they going to expect? Fast moving. They're going to get bored very, very quickly. And that's not just for the kids. That's for people that are in the 30s or 40s or even 50s or 60s or older. They want things, immediate gratification, and it's got to be, in their face, and it's got to be entertaining.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I'm actually glad you brought that up. From a business standpoint, Doctor, from your experience, have you noticed that there's a faster transition of executives making faster decisions because of the ADD culture we live in?
Well, one of the things that I find is there are certain behavioral styles that like to make decisions. There's certain behavioral styles that hate to make decisions. Okay, and it's important to understand that, because the ones that hate to make decisions, they usually don't have a problem with giving you multiple options to choose from, or may even give you a recommendation, okay, on that. So you need to understand what their behavioral style is, because you can have excellent CEOs that don't like to make decisions. What they've done in a lot of cases is they put people around them that like to make decisions. All right. Now there are other people who do like make decisions. There's a particular behavioral style, that likes fast moving things. They like to be doing a million things all at one time. They get bored. They might be lousy closers, especially getting into sales, and might be lousy closers, or they might try to get to the close too soon. Okay, and the client's not ready, or the person who they're trying to sell to isn't ready yet to get to the close because of their style. So there are all those types of things. So I don't think it's changed that much, regarding the executives, wanting to do that. I think that's a behavioral style. Ask me that around 20 or 30 years if I'm still around, when we have these kids that are like 6 or 10 or 12 or 15, that are 30, 40 or 50, and they're the ones who are the CEOs and the presidents dominantly.
Yeah. I met one 22-year-old YouTuber. He's worth about 12 million right now. And I met another kid who's 19 who's worth 1.6 million. So these kids are becoming CEOs faster than I would have ever anticipated. So, but hey, kudos to them. They're figuring it out. Right. So with your experience also, Doctor, what about from a sales standpoint? What are some of the biggest mistakes you're seeing made on the sales side of the field right now with the companies that you're working with?
Well, it's interesting. More than half of our clientele really deal with sales. Okay, and we help organizations hire the right salespeople as well as the right executives and staff at any level. But one of the things that I'm seeing more is there's much more reliant on technology, as we're all seeing, and the assumption is people feel comfortable with that technology. Right? Just talk to a teenager, and the teenager trying to explain something to one of their grandparents, and the frustration that happens with the teenager as they're trying to explain how to use technology, right? And the anxiety that you might have somebody who's in the 50s or 60s or 70s who isn't used to the technology. So what happens is you have these people in their 20s and their 30s, and they feel comfortable with technology, and they assume everybody else does. You can't operate that way. You need to look and see, again, as I said near the beginning of our conversation today, it's all about them. It's not about you. So it's important to test out and see where they are with their comfort level with technology. All right. And then depending on what their comfort level is with that top technology, then you can be more technologically or less technologically focused when you're interacting with somebody. But it's important not to make assumptions. Because most times when you make assumptions, you're wrong. And so it's important to try to figure it out. And the easiest way to figure it out is not to figure it out, but to just ask questions. And by asking the questions, you listen to what they're telling you. And from that, you can tell how quickly they're going to adapt to the technology or deal with the technology.
Yeah. I can't tell you. I mean, you nailed it right there. Growing up in San Francisco, I'm always surrounded by technology, and I'll get on a call with someone and I'll say, "Oh, I'm getting a Slack," and customers will be on the other hand, "What? You're getting cut some slack? Is your boss giving you slack?" Or I'm like, "Never mind. Let's focus on something else." So I agree that you shouldn't make the assumption that people know about email or even about a Salesforce before you're actually getting to know them. It's bitten me in the back a few times. What about from a management standpoint, Doctor? Are you seeing from a leadership standpoint that people are becoming a little bit more impatient with employees, especially during these COVID times? Love to hear what you're hearing these days.
Well, I'm just seeing a lot of stress, just everywhere, right? Because people are tired of being cooped up. And Zoom, like we're using here, has made a pile of dough and really, come from nowhere because of this. And the COVID has made some organizations very, very wealthy. All right. But what's happened is a lot of salespeople, good salespeople, focus on the relationship. And there's a big difference from being face to face with somebody than by having your 15th Zoom meeting of the day, type of thing. So so there is that impatience and there is that frustration. And I would suspect that there's a lot of people who used to be much better at sales because they were focusing on the relationship. And there's a warmer feeling when you're face to face with somebody. And there is this impatience. So one of the things that we've been helping our people do is understand where that stress is coming from. We actually have an assessment that looks at 21 different stress points. okay, for an individual, and helps them understand where that is. And then we can actually put two and multiple people on the same tool so they can understand what's stressing each other out, which is really incredible and helpful. But I am seeing that stress factor, and it's not just at work, because what's happening is they're stressed at home, and more people are working from home. So their spouse might be there, their kids might be there, a grandparent might be there, because it's not, as safe as it used to be on the long-term care facilities. So there are those distraction going on. So it really is a different environment. It really is a different world.
Yep. So it is your firm belief that a face-to-face interaction is a lot more powerful than a Zoom conversation, especially in the business world.
For most people, it is. For some people, it is, and we're getting back to style again. What they feel comfortable with. But I haven't run into very many executives that really love being behind a camera.
Apologies in advance for this, by the way.
Well, I feel very comfortable. I mean, I've actually done over 40 television shows, so being
wow.
behind a camera is no big deal. I feel very comfortable, so it's not an issue. It is more difficult to do training, behind one of these, because you don't have the excitement. I mean, one of the things that I love to do when I'm doing training is no matter how big the auditorium is or how small it is, I'm walking around, I'm interacting with people. I'm not sitting on a stage or behind a podium. I mean, I'm with them, and I feel the energy, and it gives me more energy as well. So it's interesting regarding how this works, and there are different behavioral styles that are just very enlightening, and just lift up everybody else in an organization. And one of the things that I like to do is I like to ask them questions and get them more engaged, when there is some downtime in the group.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you one thing. I definitely underestimated the power of a handshake. Doing business like this for the last year, there's that some lack of accountability that I'm seeing on the other side of the field too. It's, if I do this, are you going to help me, Mrs. Customer, Mrs. Prospect? And before, when I would fly out and meet people, it would be a completely different scenario versus it is now. It's maybe we'll get back to you. I don't know. I'm seeing a lot more of a drop off from attending a meeting standpoint, and people actually becoming more late because of what you just mentioned, the family in the background, the kids, the wife, etc. Are you seeing those type of behaviors as well with the new crazy world that we're living in?
Well, one of the things that I'm seeing a lot of, especially with Zoom or WebEx or any of these, different technologies, or Google, is people are doing other things. Okay. And there's an assumption that if they're on the call or the meeting, that they're actually focusing on the meeting. So organizations, and more organizations are doing this. They're requiring people to keep the camera on. Okay. To make sure that they are at least looking, and they're actually there. Okay. Because if there is no camera on, it's like, well, they might not even be there. Right. I mean, I was talking to an executive yesterday, and she was talking about doing housework, during one of the meetings. I mean, so you really have to be careful about that. And one of the assumptions that I found, and that this happens all the time, is people assume that if you send them a message, they've read it, they've understood it, and they remember it. Well, by the time you get to the remembering, you're talking about maybe 5%, okay, wow, of all the stuff that you have sent them, maybe 5%. Okay. And when I do executive development work, we give people readings ahead of time, and I never assume they're going to do the reading ahead of time, because most of them don't. Okay. And if I ask them if they have done it, they shake their head. Okay. And then I have to be in a situation where I know they haven't read it in most cases. So I need to pull it out of them without embarrassing them. All right. So we have to be concerned about those types of things when we're using this technology. So more and more, I'm finding more and more executives are requiring the camera to be functioning and working. And that might mean that you have to clean up the back of your, what people are seeing. Okay. I mean, this backdrop was developed by one of my tech people. All right. Because this isn't where I'm at. I'm actually in my office. Okay. And I have both of my degrees behind me. Okay. But this is with Zoom, you can use any background that you want to.
No,
So, I mean,
I'm familiar with the backdrops, but yours, I actually thought you were in that office of yours. Yours, you
oh,
got a
well,
nice.
I just did it, I shouldn't have opened my big mouth. So,
High
but I've got some
resolution.
excellent staff and they do excellent things. So I will tell the person who did this for us, they fooled you, Mike. Okay.
I might need a referral because this is just plain white walls.
All right. Just let me know. We're here to help.
Yes, sir. I will say though, you nailed it because if the camera is off, I'm already taking that prospect a little less seriously. And I kid you not, I actually heard a golf swing in the background before. And I almost wanted to pick up like 4, but I didn't. I didn't want to embarrass him or anything. But no, you
I
totally
believe.
nailed it. What about kids? I mean, you taught. You said 400 to 500 kids in a classroom at Texas A&M. That's impressive. How? I feel like that was probably your hardest job of them all. How did you manage so many young, intelligent minds in an MBA program like that?
Well, they were undergraduates. The
Oh,
MBA
undergrad. Excuse
wasn't
me.
wasn't 450. We only had around 45 or 50 in those classes, which is the more normal classes. But with 400 or 450, I mean, you have to be somewhat charismatic, and I had that ability, and you have to be energetic, and you have to give them something that they want to learn from. And as I mentioned, I worked the group, so I wasn't on the stage. A lot of the time I was doing different things. So it was really interesting as to what was going on. Excuse me for a second. I can't read that.
Business never stops.
Hold on a second.
No worries. This is why we have editors. Anyway, yeah. So kids wise, you taught an actual, was it the MBA program? You said undergraduate program.
Well,
What classes were you?
I've taught at all levels. I mean, I've taught at the undergraduate level. I've taught at the MBA level. I taught PhDs, and the most fun I have is with executives. But because they're the most challenging, and they ask the best questions, and they share their stories, which are I'm a facilitator when I'm teaching. I facilitate education. I facilitate knowledge. I facilitate wisdom. Okay, and there's plenty of people in that room that have plenty of wisdom, and the idea is to share that wisdom and to do it in a way that people are buying into it and understanding it, so they can effectively use that wisdom themselves. So what happened with the students with the 400 or 450? I mean, I did that for about 20 of the years. I taught 2 or 3 sections of 400 to 475 students. And
Wow.
it was really, really interesting. And what happens is we're constantly moving. There's different things going on. There's always an experiential exercise or 2. There are videos, that we use in the classroom. There were different, and what happens now is you have the technologies in the classroom, so you can actually do surveys to ask them to think and to make decisions right there in front of you. So there's all kinds of things that you can do. One of my favorite techniques was I would walk to the back of the classroom and walk around the back of the classroom, and it would really be disorienting to the students, because how many times is a faculty member behind you? Okay, all right, well, that changes your point of reference. That changes a whole bunch of stuff. Right. And it's kind of interesting working with computers, because I would say it's fine for you to use your computers, but if you're using your computer, you better not be working on another class, okay, or doing other work. So I would walk around and I'd walk up and down the aisles, and every once in a while I'd see somebody focusing on something else. And I would just walk over there and stand behind their shoulder and say, oh, that's interesting. Okay, and everybody would know that, okay, he's caught another one, type of thing. And never embarrassed anybody more than that. But if you were in my class, I mean, if you don't want to focus on what we're going to talk about, that's fine. I can respect that. Don't come to class. Okay, but if you're there with me, my expectation is that you're there with me, or you're going to be doing your part of being there with me. And I have off days just like everybody, but most of the time, I've got their attention, and I can tell that from the evaluations that I get, and the awards that I've won over the years, for teaching.
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing wrong with holding students accountable. I mean, your time is valuable, right? And what you've learned, you want to pass that knowledge. So no, I can't say I wasn't that guy that sat in the back of the room and did a little YouTubing, but you're like you said, we're all evolving as humans.
Well, let
Uh,
me give you a little secret, Mike. If you're in a
please.
classroom like that in the future, all right, don't sit in the front and don't sit in the back. Sit
So-
somewhere in the middle. Okay, because what happens is when you sit in the front, the teacher can see you very easily, and what a lot of people do is they look towards the back of the room. Okay, but if you're in the middle, it's a lot easier to get lost.
Lost in translation. Love it. What advice would you have, doctor, for someone that's trying to or struggling in sales right now, specifically in this world that we live in? Clearly, with your experience, I'm guessing you deal with a lot on an executive level, but specifically on the individual contributor level, what advice would you have someone that's just struggling right now to get by with sales?
Well, we deal with a lot of individuals, and not just on the individual levels for sales, and not just on the executive level. And I've got two words of advice. Okay, one of them is know thyself, because you want to be in a situation that you're good at, that you like, and you're passionate about. And the second one is choose something that you have a passion for, right? Because if you have a passion for it, you'll probably do it well. At least you will be working to do it well. You'll probably make a decent living, in a lot of cases, make a very, very good or outstanding living, right? But even if you don't make an outstanding living, or it's not meeting up to your financial expectations, you're going to have fun and you're going to enjoy what you're going to do and you're going to respect yourself. So those are really, really important things. But for a salesperson in this day and age is know thyself, so you can really get into selling the product. Some people are really good at selling concrete products. Some people are really good at selling abstract products. So you need to understand yourself to the point where you can sell it. Not there are very few people that are good at selling anything. Okay, so it's really important to understand, where you're good at. Some are better relationship sellers. Some people are better technology or technique related sellers. Some people don't like scripts. Some people love scripts. So it depends on who you are as to what you feel the most comfortable doing, because that's going to help you be more successful.
Yep. What about for someone that, let's say, has a passion for making art, but is having trouble actually selling the concept of it? Do you advise that they continue building on the skill of selling, or outsource that specific portion of it to someone else that's more experienced in that field?
I find that people do best when they do what their core talents are. And the organization does best, or actually people do best, when they delegate to other people things that they're not good at. Because a lot of times they just procrastinate and put off those things that they're not good at, but sometimes those things are essential to the sale and to being successful. And that's why we're seeing more and more with teams, and we've spent a lot of time with teams. We've got a special series on teams. We have a special series on our Abelson Learning Resource Network. That's what that A-Learn stands for behind us, all right, which is our learning platform where we focus on teams. We interview some outstanding teams. One of our industries is residential real estate, all right, and we've interviewed probably the best team in the entire country. Right, this one team this year has sold about 2,500 properties. Yes, 2,500. So they have some significant skills and techniques and incredible insights on how to sell. And we cover that because we do these programs around an hour long each. And we focused on that. And we actually have a team assessment, and we did an assessment of their executive team within their team, within their larger team. And we talk about that. And so it's really creative and interesting to see how their executive team functions and what the weaknesses are. Even their team at the executive level had some weaknesses and limitations. And we were able to identify that, and we talked about that. And they were really happy that they were involved in this, because they came away with some insights regarding what they could do to be even better.
That's almost 9 properties a day. That's amazing.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. They are an amazing team, and they've been clients of ours for around 10 years now. And they've been using our assessments to help them hire and to help them better understand their clients, because a lot of our a lot of our clients use the assessments to also understand their clients, which is crucial.
Yeah. And I know your time is valuable, doctor. I'd love to talk with you all day, but what I had last question for you, and this is one of my favorites I've been asking all of my guests. If you had Dr. Brown's time machine and could go back and talk to the younger Dr. Michael Abelson, what advice would you give him?
Well, I would the advice I would give him is to do something that you're passionate about and do something that's true to you. I mean, I've gone down many journeys and many trails that wound up being dead ends. And some of those dead ends, it was okay when I reached the dead end because I was having fun and I felt good about the journey, right? And I think that's always the important part. You need to feel good about what you're doing. And you need to, when you wake up and you look in the mirror every day, you need to be willing to say, I'm happy with what I see. Maybe not physically, okay, as we get older, all right? But psychologically, I'm happy with the person who I am. And if you can't answer that and say you're happy with the person who you are, maybe you should think about the person that you are.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. Well, doctor, I really appreciate you taking the time once again. Your background, your achievements are very impressive, and can't wait to see what else you have in store for us in this crazy world. Thank you so much again for taking the time, and please stay in touch.
Right. Well, thank you. And thank you for the interview. It's a pleasure having a chance to get to know you better. And hopefully people will visit us at our website, which is just real easy. It's abelson.net, ABELSON.net. All right. Well,
Abelson,
thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
thank you, sir. Have a good one.